Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm Sana Saiyed. I'm currently a PhD candidate at the University of Notre Dame, and I'm really excited to share the work I did with the Scientists in Park program over the last few months. So my project was concerned with how we can take all of the current on-the-ground climate science research that's being done at the national parks and communicate it to students in a way that not only educates them, but also inspires action from them. So this summer, I worked within the education division at Hawaii Volcanoes National Park to build a high school climate science curriculum that focused specifically on the island of Hawaii. Using my experience as a high school science teacher and as a graduate student studying how human-nature relationships can influence the way we relate to and treat wildlife, I developed lesson plans that take students on a journey to connect them to their land and foster a sense of responsibility to preserve and care for it. So because it's in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, Hawaii is particularly susceptible to climate change impacts like sea level rise, coastal erosion, and ocean warming and acidification. Hawaii Island, the southernmost of the Hawaiian Islands, is the site of two active volcanoes that make up Hawaii Volcanoes National Park, where I worked this summer. The island is ecologically diverse and unique as a result of this active volcanism, which means climate change's forces have unique impacts here. By highlighting the uniqueness of their local ecologies and weaving in cultural narratives and history, this curriculum offers an opportunity to educate students on climate change while simultaneously instilling a sense of belonging and responsibility to the land. Before I started actually building my lesson plans, I dove into the current climate science research happening on the island and, importantly, hiking around the park to build my own connections with the ecology. I spoke with various scientists and specialists across the park and learned about Native Hawaiian culture and connections to the park's lands. While conducting hikes, I was able to better understand how students might observe the landscapes, vegetation, and other wildlife to get a sense of the uniqueness of the island's ecology and a sense of their ecosystem's health. For one hike, I walked along the edge of the primary caldera of the Kilauea volcano and through an area with multiple sulfur vents. These vents are produced by cracks in the surface where sulfuric gases from the volcano's magma are released. Though this walk was only about 1 to 2 miles, the presence of vegetation drastically changed for obvious reasons. It's a bit hard to grow near all that sulfur dioxide. With a bit more observation and some research, I learned that lichen, which is pictured here, are particularly sensitive to sulfur dioxide and other harmful emissions, making them an effective bioindicator of air quality. So I crafted a lesson where students track the presence of lichen through this hiking trail as they learn about volcanic and climate change related emissions. After comparing their tally of lichen presence near the sulfur vents versus farther away from the vents, students discuss and hypothesize why this drastic difference occurs using what they learned about air quality and its impacts on biodiversity. This lesson also weaves in issues of environmental justice, as areas that are downwind of the volcano are lower income communities that are particularly affected by poor air quality from the volcanic and other emissions across the island. Another lesson centers on wildfires, which are a major consequence of climate change that we see occurring more and more frequently across the island and across the world. While hiking, students explore the characteristics of the vegetation on the trail that might contribute to flammability or survivability during wildfires. I was actually able to test this lesson with our youth rangers, and using their observational skills, they pointed out properties such as wetness, surface area, leaf waxiness, and breeziness as potential contributors to different vegetation types spreading, sustaining, or surviving wildfires. What these observational lessons do is give students the tools to recognize the health of their surrounding ecosystems and connect it with broader global patterns while simultaneously reconnecting students with their scientific intuition. This intuition is a vital piece of feeling connected and committed to nature. The lessons all conclude with activities dedicated to solutions or improvements, from community education or resilience scenarios to demanding environmental justice from local governments to things like beach cleanups. The students synthesize their observations and analyses from the lessons to figure out how they can fight against climate change both personally and more broadly. Pictured here on the left are the youth rangers playing a community resilience board game where they had to brainstorm ways to protect their neighborhoods from a spreading wildfire by deciding how to best allocate community resources. A post-game discussion revealed that the youth rangers believed that the most powerful way to build community resilience to climate disasters is by fostering a strong sense of community responsibility and knowledge of land. So how can we do that? A common challenge cited within science and climate change education is getting students connected with and committed to their environments and fighting to preserve them. It's important to note, however, that many cultures across the world, especially indigenous ones, don't necessarily have that challenge. Traditional ecological and non-Western scientific knowledges strongly value sharing history and ancestral knowledge as a way to pass on a connection to nature and a drive for science. In Native Hawaiian culture, the sharing of mo'olelo or legends and the performance of hula are storytelling devices that teach and preserve cultural understandings of what we gain from nature emotionally, spiritually, and physically. The addition of cultural understandings of place is a key component to an effective climate education if our goals include enacting change and instilling connection to land. Given the history of the national park system, particularly the displacement of indigenous communities, we have a responsibility to prioritize and value traditional ecological knowledge, especially given its effectiveness in environmental action. Many Native Hawaiian values are connected to sustainable living, caring for and listening to the land, and being stewards of the earth for future generations. Hawaii Volcanoes National Park has a unique opportunity to share more than just the groundbreaking climate change research that's happening, but also things like wisdom and inspiration and connection to land. We should certainly be using all of the tools we have to combat climate change. By incorporating these Hawaiian values into the curriculum, we hope that students receive a blend of cultural and scientific knowledge that inspires a lifelong commitment to fighting against the strongest force of environmental change of our generation. So the curriculum that I worked on will be available on the park website this fall, and it can also be adapted across parks or even at your home. So finally, I just want to say thank you to my park supervisor, Jody, the SIP coordinators and staff, and my awesome coworker, Kaylani Haney, and the rest of Hawaii Volcanoes National Park's Interpretation Division. And also thank you all for attending. If you have any questions, please let me know.